Hi, HDC. Pastor Kurt here, and we're excited to have you with us. Today we're doing Dial Your Marriage to 11 with Kevin. This is Kevin Thompson. He's joined us, and Kevin has a long history of working with marriages and families, and we are so excited. He's coming actually up to our church soon, and you can look at the calendar and be ready for his arrival. But we asked you to reach out ahead of time and have him answer some really common questions around marriage. And so, Kevin, it's great to have you. And here's question number one. How can couples prioritize communication in their marriage? And then maybe what are some special practical tips for improving their communication?
Kurt, great to be with you. It's interesting to me, probably the number one issue I hear from couples, specifically couples that have a pretty good marriage, is the issue of communication. And they would say their number one problem is communication. As a matter of fact, in the 80s and 90s, the theory on marriage was basically communication. The concept was, if we could teach couples how to use I statements, how to communicate in a proper way, they would have a healthy marriage. But what's interesting is that theory in the 80s and 90s did not impact marriages at all. All that happened is, as unhealthy couples were fighting, they began to use I statements in a proper way, but they didn't feel a deep connection. And so I would say for the average couple, you think you have a communication problem, but you probably don't. It's actually a connection problem. And if you can create a healthy connection between you and your spouse, even whenever you miscommunicate, even whenever you say something with a tone you shouldn't say, you say a word that maybe you shouldn't say, or in a reference that you shouldn't do, because that connection is there, the relationship continues to go forward. But even if you use everything right, you use the I statements, you never judge your partner, you listen properly, you communicate in a very give and take kind of way, if you don't feel emotionally, intimately connected to your spouse, your communication might be good, but it's going to be cold. And so there's no question communication is important. We need to learn how to do it better. And specifically with the busyness of our lives, we need to create modes and methods that we're going to communicate effectively. But communication, generally speaking, is the symptom of a much deeper issue. And if couples will strengthen their emotional connection, now that includes communication. They have to listen well. They have to look below the surface to actually attune to their spouse's emotions, to see them, to see what's going on, to hear their words through a proper filter. But as that emotional connection grows, the communication generally kind of takes care of itself. Now, I would say a practical tip that I would give is, so my wife owns an advertising agency, and of course I'm a pastor, and so I write and I speak for a living. And we laugh hysterically at how often we miscommunicate. So two professional communicators miscommunicate all the time. And if you will come in with that understanding of how difficult communication is, think about this. How often do you have an opinion that's actually kind of 51-49? That you kind of want it this way, but really you're not that far opposed from the opposite opinion. If we feel that way all the time, that means, what are the chances that our spouse will just naturally know what we think or feel or understand? And so if you will approach communication with this understanding that we assume we're going to miscommunicate all the time, we know that communication is always going to be a difficult issue. I know that me knowing my own opinion half the time is difficult. It's going to be really difficult for my spouse to understand it. And if you will approach communication in that manner, it will make things much easier. Whenever you miscommunicate, you'll understand, I expected this to happen. Of course we experience moments like this. Now, obviously, we're going to have to repair. We're going to have to come back and apologize and do all those sorts of things. And so if you will understand that communication is a problem for everybody, and we're going to struggle through this because we're human beings, it will lessen the expectation, which will then ease the moments in which we tend to miscommunicate. And then secondly, I would say, look, the negative communication is going to happen. You don't have to plan to have a fight. You don't have to work hard to make sure there's going to be tension. It's the good moments that you really have to focus in on. Healthy couples and unhealthy couples generally have about the same amount of negative communication as each other. What distinguishes a healthy relationship from an unhealthy relationship is a healthy relationship tends to have a whole lot more positive communications. So be very intentional in saying the kind word and saying thank you and pointing out the love. And whenever you feel a tension, to step back and to recommunicate your love for each other and how you're on each other's sides. And if you will up the positive communications, then the negative communications will go back into the context in which they are, which is, you know what, we disagree on this, but we agree on a whole lot more. So connection over communication, and then understand the problems will exist, up your positive communications, and I think your relationship will get better.
I love that, Kevin. I think that's so great because so often we think of communication as an information issue. And I love the fact you're focusing on a connection issue because if we just think, oh, I get better information, it's going to help me. Well, you actually have to have the connection before you get that. And that's a great insight. I love that. Thanks for that input. That was awesome.